Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. You have the Cruiserweight Championship. Lawrence Okolie, great jab, against a tough guy, Billam-Smith. Let's talk about it. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, there's a myth out there. A lot of us believe it, that a guy who is a tough guy, who when you're looking at the highlights of his fights or you're looking at his past fights, you're seeing him take punches, you're seeing him get inside, you're seeing him throw hooks, he's prepared to trade, he's just a tough son of a gun. And we want to believe that a guy like that can beat a guy with a great jab, can beat a guy who softens you up with the jab, but also has a great right hand, that after you've been battered by the jab and you forget that the guy is two-handed who you're fighting, the other guy can just come in and hit you with that right hand and take you out. Put differently, there's a difference between the kind of toughness that Billam-Smith has and the boxing skill level that Lawrence Okolie has. Now understand, I do feel that there are fighters out there who could give Okolie a lot of problems. Right? Think about a Mike Tyson type, a Carlos Takam type. Right? Jabbers have a problem with guys who can move their head, who can move their upper body, who can get underneath them. Right? Who can move fast. Okolie is a bit of a throwback to the way boxing was right before Mike Tyson emerged on the scene. But understand, in this world, right now, 2023, in my eyes at least, and I say this on the eve of a big fight here, Lawrence Okolie, who's 6'5", don't be fooled by the weight class, cruiserweight. You should already know, too, that a cruiserweight can become the heavyweight champion because we have Usyk. And this is, of course, after Holyfield, David Haye, countless others. Right? Let's remember, too, some men have gone from the light heavyweight championship to the heavyweight championship. Michael Spinks comes to mind. Right? Well, the point I'm making here is Okolie is one of the few men who I believe right now, just based on who's out there, would be a major threat to the heavyweight title. Right? Just understand, he has a better jab than most in the heavyweight division. He has the height, he has the length. Right? There aren't a lot of Mike Tysons and Carlos Takams at heavyweight right now. You have a lot of guys who stand in front of you and try to outslug you. Or you have other guys trying to box who are big and clunky. Right? Tomorrow's fight really, or in fact in a few hours, I guess, the fight really should be viewed as an audition. Okolie is going to have an aggressive cruiser in front of him who's going to try to get deep in the pocket on him and who doesn't have a head that can avoid Lawrence Okolie's jab. He doesn't have the upper body movement. He doesn't have the defensive skills. He's not going to tuck the head someplace to avoid Lawrence Okolie's jab. So the question is whether brute force, whether audacity is enough to cause Okolie to get thrown off his game. In other words, Billam-Smith is going to try to be aggressive He's going to try to cub in and crowd Lawrence Okolie. If Okolie is the smooth technician that I think he is, I'm expecting a stoppage. I'm expecting Okolie to soften this guy up with the jab, and then to find that there is simply nothing between him, his right hand, and Billam-Smith's face. Right? I saw comments from others. Richard Reactpour and others are saying, oh, he better get him early. And, oh, Billam-Smith is the kind of guy who is determined and will build up a head of steam later in a fight. My words, not Reactpour's, or rather my summation of Reactpour's argument. But, I think it's the opposite. When you're dealing with a guy who has a great jab, folks, the jab takes over. The jab at first looks like a nuisance, right? It's hitting the guy in the face. The guy throwing the jab looks effortless. You think, well, surely that punch couldn't be the difference maker in this fight. And then later you notice that jab, think the Joe Joyce fight against Zhili Zhang. Suddenly that jab starts to puff up the other guy's face. The other guy has a hard time seeing things. Right? The other guy starts walking into shots. Right? Billam-Smith doesn't have, to me, a great back foot. He's not defensively blessed. I know I'm sounding hard here. I know he's a tough opponent. Right? I know he's a determined opponent. But skills matter. And Okolie is blessed with one of boxing's best jabs. Okolie softens you up to the point where he can just turn over a right hand on you. Right? Let me point out, too, that Okolie is a guy who's savvy. In other words, people get in the pocket, he's able to clinch them. You'll notice guys with great jabs know how to hit you, and then as you're dazed and confused, momentarily stunned, they know how to jump in and clinch you. They're controlling distance, they're controlling tempo. Right? If Okolie handles Billam-Smith's aggression, the question that needs to be asked is, how would he do against Anthony Joshua, against Deontay Wilder? Right? I think Zhang's southpaw orientation, as well as his just general boxing savvy, and the fact that he hits a hell of a lot harder than Lawrence Okolie. And Okolie's right hand does pack a punch, but it's not a Zhili Zhang punch. Zhang is among the hardest punchers in the entire sport. Right? I think if Zhili Zhang beats him, Carlos Takam would be fascinating because he's the kind of, let's say, modern day version of Mike Tyson. I'm not saying Takam's a Hall of Famer, but he's a guy who can move his head. And he showed you that he could get inside on Tony Yoka when they fought. Right? Him against Okolie would be interesting. But understand, I believe Okolie right now beats most of the top 10 heavyweights. Let me go one step further. Let's sound really ridiculous here. Okolie's at greater risk, quite frankly, fighting at cruiser than he is at heavy. Because at cruiser, there's a greater chance that he's going to fight a guy who is physically smaller than him. Right? You have a lot of heavyweights who are 6'5", who Okolie's going to look across at, and who Okolie won't have to reach to hit with his jab. Right? Also, heavyweights tend to not be as coordinated as cruiserweights. I believe Okolie is at more risk in the cruiserweight division than he would be in the heavyweight division, where, quite frankly, he would be an elite heavyweight. So pay close attention to Okolie and his career. Understand, as talented as the cruisers have been, right? Usyk, former cruiser, Maris Breedis, cruiser, Jay Opataya right now has some talent, beat Maris Breedis. As talented as the cruisers have been, the paydays at cruiserweight pale in comparison to the paydays at heavyweight. The glamour at cruiserweight pales in comparison to the glamour of being the heavyweight champion. Right? Take a hard look at Lawrence Okolie. Consider this an audition for Okolie at heavyweight. Right? He's 6'5". He has one of boxing's best jabs. You have a lot of guys at heavy right now who really can't move their heads. Right? The head is in the way. You have a guy who punches harder than we think with his right hand and who has some defensive gifts, right? Being able to clinch on demand like Okolie does is a talent, folks, right? If Okolie ends up outclassing Billam-Smith, if Billam-Smith ends up with a busted up face and ends up hitting the canvas, if Okolie somehow is able to get through the fight without getting dinged up like so many of Billam-Smith's opponents, then I hope you consider the idea that a vertical opponent who's in there to play tough guy just doesn't have the talent level, particularly if he's right-handed, to beat Lawrence Okolie. I'm expecting Okolie to win. I'm expecting this to be a showcase. I'm not expecting a close fight. I believe the casino, which has Okolie as a sizable favorite, has priced this fight correctly. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I thought the Glowacki fight was more interesting from a style matchup than this fight, right? That fight, I was expecting Glowacki to, come in low, have his head in a place that was hard to hit, right? Okolie solved him, got the stoppage, dominated that fight. Billam-Smith, to me, is a much simpler opponent, right? He's right in front of you. You look at the highlights, he's taking shots up top, right? Okolie's jab, if you can't get past that jab, you're going to lose every round, right? And let me just say, if you fall asleep getting hit by the jab, Okolie has a right hand that can drop you. I'm expecting Okolie to raise his profile in this fight, to dominate it. Quite frankly, I'm expecting Okolie to win this by stoppage. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. There have been some comments here online. I notice some of you have asked me about this fight. I can tell Billam-Smith has a fan base. People view this fight as a possible upset. I'm not one of them. I like Lawrence Okolie here. I'm going to take Okolie simply to win. Try to sprinkle some on Okolie by stoppage. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.